When we speak about believing in ourselves, most of us immediately imagine confidence, courage, and a boldness that shakes the world. But the truth is, belief doesn't begin with loud declarations, nor does it start on the grand stage of life. It begins in silence. It begins in that quiet moment when you choose to accept yourself exactly as you are. And I say choose because acceptance is not automatic. It is an act of courage, a decision you make again and again, often in the face of voices that tell you otherwise. Self-acceptance is not about settling. It is not about saying, I am perfect. I need no change. No, it is about looking into the mirror of your own soul and acknowledging both your light and your shadows without shame. It is about being honest enough to say, yes, I have scars. Yes, I have fears. Yes, I have stumbled. But I am still worthy of love, of respect, of purpose. This honesty is the soil in which true belief grows. Without it, belief is hollow. Too many of us fight silent battles against ourselves. We wake up every morning already carrying the burden of comparison, measuring ourselves against people who seem more successful, more beautiful, more intelligent. We scroll through curated lives on our screens and conclude that we are less. And in that conclusion, we break our own spirit before the day even begins. Tell me, how can you believe in yourself when your starting point is rejection of who you are? Belief cannot coexist with self-rejection. It must be rooted in acceptance. But here is the paradox: acceptance is not passive. When I say accept yourself, I do not mean give up on growth. I mean embrace the truth of where you stand today so that growth can begin from an honest place. A seed must first accept that it is small before it can break open and grow into a tree. Denying your reality does not make you stronger. It only delays transformation. Philosophers through time have echoed this wisdom in different ways. Socrates spoke of the examined life. Rumi spoke of the beauty of our wounds. Modern psychology speaks of self-compassion. All point toward the same truth. Belief in oneself does not spring from pretending to be flawless. It comes from embracing the wholeness of your being, even the parts that feel unfinished, even the parts that ache. Think of the people you admire the most. Are they people who never failed, never cried, never faltered? Or are they people who embraced their humanity and rose anyway? The strength that inspires us in others is never the absence of weakness. It is the courage to accept weakness and still keep moving. That is the silent power of self-acceptance. And perhaps one of the most radical forms of self-acceptance is learning to embrace your scars. The world teaches us to hide them. Physical scars, emotional scars, scars of rejection, scars of loss. We cover them, we disguise them, we pretend they don't exist. But scars are not signs of brokenness. They are signs of survival. Or they are living proof that you endured, that you kept breathing when life tried to take your breath away. They are not shameful. They are sacred. When you accept your scars, you stop fighting your own story. You begin to honor it. Now, why is this important for belief? Because when you deny parts of yourself, you are constantly at war with your own being. And when you are at war within, how will you ever have energy to believe, to dream, to create? Acceptance ends that inner war. It allows you to redirect your energy toward building, toward living, toward loving. Let me tell you something many people overlook. Acceptance is also freedom. Think about it. When you truly accept yourself, the opinions of others lose their power over you. Criticism may still hurt, but it does not define you. Comparison may still whisper, but it no longer controls you. The endless chase to be enough quiets down because you already know you are, and in that freedom, your belief in yourself is no longer conditional. It is not, I will believe in myself if I succeed, or I will believe in myself if they approve. It becomes, I believe in myself because I am. And yes, there will be days when acceptance feels like the hardest thing to do. Days when the mirror shows you more flaws than beauty. Days when your mind reminds you of every failure, every rejection. On those days, acceptance does not come naturally. But it is precisely on those days that you must practice it intentionally. Acceptance is not a one-time revelation. It is a daily discipline. It is like a muscle that strengthens with use. The more you practice accepting yourself, the easier it becomes to believe in yourself. Now, let me be clear. Acceptance is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. Once you accept yourself, you no longer live in denial. You no longer waste energy pretending. You can now begin the work of transformation. You can improve, you can grow, you can evolve, but you do so from a place of love, not hatred. And that makes all the difference. Because growth rooted in self-rejection is exhausting. It feels like punishment. Growth rooted in self-acceptance feels liberating. It feels like love. And isn't it true that every great act of belief, every great achievement begins with a simple act of love? Love for an idea, love for a dream, of love for life. Why then should belief in yourself be any different? It must begin with love for who you are today, even as you aspire to who you can be tomorrow. My friends, remember this: the world will always have opinions. It will measure you by standards that shift with time. One day you will be too much, the next day not enough. If you try to anchor your belief in those shifting sands, you will drown. Anchor your belief in the one place that is steady within yourself. And steadiness comes only when you have accepted yourself, not partially, not conditionally, but wholly. So the next time you doubt yourself, pause. Ask, am I doubting my ability or am I doubting my worth? Ability can be improved. Skills can be learned. Knowledge can be gained. But your worth was never in question. It is not earned, it is inherent. Accepting this truth is the most radical act of belief you can practice. And I want to leave you with this thought. Self-acceptance is not loud. It does not announce itself to the world. It whispers. It whispers every morning when you wake up, every night before you sleep. It whispers, you are enough. And if you learn to listen, that whisper grows into a belief so unshakable that no storm can silence it. Because at the end of the day, believing in yourself does not begin with the world's applause. It begins with your own quiet acceptance. And once you make peace with who you are, there is no force in the world that can stop you from becoming who you were meant to be. Rasson's life when the path of belief demands solitude. When you believe in yourself, sooner or later, you will reach a crossroad where your convictions do not match the expectations of the crowd. And in that moment, you will have a choice to blend in for the comfort of belonging or to stand apart for the truth of who you are. That is when belief is truly tested, not in the echo of applause, but in the silence of isolation. Standing alone is never easy. As human beings, we are wired for connection, for community, for acceptance. We long to be part of something larger than ourselves. That longing is natural, even beautiful. But the danger arises when that longing becomes a prison, when the fear of being excluded or misunderstood forces us to shrink, to silence our voices, to betray the authenticity of our own being. And that is why courage becomes essential. Believing in yourself is not only about having faith in your abilities, but also about having the strength to walk your path, even if no one else is walking beside you. The world often celebrates conformity, even while claiming to admire originality. Society praises those who break barriers, but in the moment of breaking, those same individuals are often ridiculed, doubted, and even rejected. Think of every innovator, every dreamer, every pioneer. Before their names were carved into history, they were often dismissed as unrealistic, rebellious, or strange. What kept them moving forward was not the approval of others. It was their belief in themselves and the courage to stand alone when the world could not yet see what they saw. And that is what makes this courage so profound. It is not just about resisting opposition. It is about carrying the weight of uncertainty, the sting of loneliness, and the echo of doubt, and still saying, I choose to trust myself. This is not arrogance. It is not stubbornness. It is fidelity to your own truth. And fidelity to yourself is one of the most powerful forms of belief you can ever practice. Psychologically, standing alone can feel like exile. The human brain interprets rejection almost like physical pain. That is why so many people compromise their own values just to remain included. But here is the paradox of when you abandon yourself for the sake of others, you still end up alone. You may be surrounded by people, yet inside you will feel disconnected from your own soul. True belonging begins with belonging to yourself, and that requires the courage to risk the loss of external approval. There is also a philosophical depth to this courage. To stand alone is to recognize that truth is not always collective. Sometimes truth is deeply personal, arising from within. History has shown us countless times that majorities can be wrong, that voices of wisdom often begin as whispers. And if you silence your whisper to match the roar of the crowd, you not only betray yourself, you betray the possibility of change. Belief, therefore, is not passive, it is revolutionary. And every revolution begins with one individual willing to be different. Let me also tell you this. Standing alone does not mean being against the world. It is not about rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is about alignment. Alignment with your principles. When your values, your vision, when you align with yourself, you may find that alignment puts you outside of what is popular or even outside of what is understood. That is the price. But that price is worth paying because the alternative is far more expensive, the slow death of self-betrayal. Now, of course, it would be naive to say this path is free from fear. You will feel fear. Fear of being judged, fear of losing relationships, fear of failure without support. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to keep standing in spite of it. Fear is not your enemy. It is a reminder that you are touching the edge of growth, and growth always requires a step into the unknown. When you stand alone, something beautiful also happens. You discover your own strength in ways you never would have if you always had a crowd to lean on. You learn resilience, you cultivate clarity, you build an inner voice that does not rely on echoes. And once you develop that inner strength, even when people return, even when support finally comes, your belief is no longer fragile. It is no longer dependent on external validation. It becomes unshakable. And perhaps this is the greatest gift of standing alone. It teaches you that solitude is not emptiness. Solitude is space. Space for reflection, for self-discovery, for listening to the quiet wisdom of your own heart. In a world that is constantly loud, constantly demanding conformity, choosing solitude can be an act of radical self-love. It is in solitude that you truly meet yourself. And when you have met yourself deeply, you are never really alone again. There will be people who misunderstand you. There will be those who question your path, who mock your choices, who shake their heads when you refuse to bend. Let them. Because their misunderstanding is not your burden. Your only responsibility is to live in alignment with your truth. And in time, what once looked like isolation will become inspiration. Those who doubted you may one day admire you. Those who mocked you may one day follow you. But by then, you will no longer need their approval, because your belief will already have carried you where you were meant to be. So when life places you in that inevitable moment, when standing for yourself means standing alone, do not fear it. Embrace it. That moment is the crucible where self-belief is forged into something indestructible. Do not trade your authenticity for acceptance, because the acceptance you gain at the cost of your truth is an illusion. But the self-respect you earn when you stand alone, that is real, that is lasting. That is the foundation of a life lived with dignity and courage. And I want you to remember this: you were not created to be a copy. You were created to be an original. And originality, by definition, often begins in isolation. Do not mistake solitude for weakness. It is the birthplace of vision. It is the soil where courage grows. It is the space where belief matures into conviction. So the next time you find yourself standing alone, do not see it as abandonment. See it as alignment. See it as the universe giving you the sacred opportunity to prove to yourself and to the world that your belief is real. Because in the end, the measure of self-belief is not how confidently you walk with the crowd. It is how steadfastly you stand when the crowd walks away. And that, my friends, is the courage to stand alone.